Christmas morning came with the usual rituals: Margaret's cinnamon rolls burning slightly at the edges, Douglas insisting the fireplace be lit even though the thermostat was set to 72, and Jenna always arriving just late enough to be adored. The tree blinked from the corner of the room, strung with those same gold bulbs from my childhood. I could trace every crack in the ornaments, every chip on the ceramic reindeer flaws we'd never mention, as if tradition itself required silence. My mother, Margaret Hart, wore her velvet red robe like a queen opening court. She was glowing cheeks pink, smile wide. In her hand, a small gold-wrapped box with satin ribbon. She turned to Jenna, my younger sister, by 2 years, and their only child in spirit, if not by blood. "Open it," Margaret beamed. Jenna Blake, with her flawless blowout and rose-colored sweater, gave one of her signature gasps before she even touched the ribbon. That was her gift to the performance. She'd been doing it since we were kids, like life itself was a Hallmark audition. She peeled the paper back slowly, savoring the moment. Inside, a silver house key nestled in a velvet box. Jenna squealed. I could already feel my father's proud grin forming before I looked. "We bought her a house," Margaret said, voice catching, like she'd just announced a miracle. Jenna threw her arms around both of them. I smiled, not from joy, from muscle memory. Then Margaret turned to me, eyes, soft voice low. "You'll understand someday," she said. But I already did. My gift was a plain envelope, unmarked, placed quietly into my lap by Douglas, my father. No ceremony, no applause, just the sound of paper brushing fabric, and a silence thick enough to burn through velvet and ribbon alike. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat in my lap like something fragile and vaguely humiliating, a reminder, not just of what I lacked, but of how far they'd go to make that lack feel normal. Douglas, my father, had handed it to me with the same energy he used when passing a utility bill. No eye contact, no sentiment, just a quiet, "Here you go." Meanwhile, Jenna was still squealing, holding her new house key up to the light, like it was made of diamonds instead of debt and favoritism. Margaret dabbed her eyes with a napkin and whispered something about granite countertops and walk-in closets. I looked down at the envelope again. Thin, no card. Just my name handwritten in the corner in my mother's looping cursive, a style she'd perfected on PTA flyers and Christmas tags. I ran my finger along the flap, but didn't open it, because before I even knew what was inside, I already knew what it meant. It meant they saw me the same way they always had. I was 9 the first time I baked my own birthday cupcakes, chocolate with too much oil and not enough sugar. Margaret helped, but only because Jenna had ballet rehearsal and didn't want the kitchen to smell weird later. That morning, I came downstairs early, smiling, hopeful, thinking maybe there'd be balloons, a card, something. The kitchen was empty, no gifts, no candles, just the smell of burnt toast and Margaret humming to herself while brushing Jenna's hair in the next room. That same year, Jenna had a backyard party with ponies. Even neighbors we didn't like came by bearing glittery presents and compliments rehearsed for someone else's child. By the time I hit middle school, I'd stopped expecting anything. When I graduated with honors, Margaret didn't come. Jenna had a regional dance competition. I got a text that said, "So proud. Sorry we couldn't be there. Go get 'em." When I placed first at the State Science Fair hydroelectric dam model, fully functional, Douglas showed up 15 minutes late and left before the awards. He had a golf tee time with someone important. The following week, when Jenna landed a 30-second shampoo commercial, they threw a dinner party, champagne, framed the product shot like it was a Pulitzer. There was a moment I go back to more than I should. Senior year, academic awards night. I had worked hard, brutally hard, juggled 2 part-time jobs, maintained a 4.00 GPA, wrote papers until my fingers cramped and my eyes blurred. They called my name for the top scholarship in front of a packed auditorium. I walked on stage, scanned the crowd, and there she was. Margaret front row, not clapping, just scrolling on her phone. When I stepped down with the certificate still warm in my hands, She looked up and said loud enough for the parents nearby to hear, "Well, at least she's good at something." That one sentence sliced through the applause like a serrated knife. Even now I can still hear it. I used to wonder if I was imagining it all, if I was just the bitter child in the shadow of a shinier sibling. But favoritism doesn't whisper. It carves. It carves itself into holidays and dinners, and all the moments where love is supposed to be loudest. That morning, watching Jenna hold a house key while I held a lifeless envelope, I stopped wondering. I knew exactly where I stood. And I knew something else, too. This wasn't the moment to speak. Not yet. But it was coming. I opened the envelope with the same care you'd give a wound you already know will scar. There was only one sheet inside. No letter, no message. Just a printout of a job listing an admin assistant role at a regional insurance office. Entry level, hourly. Near the bottom, an ink that was unmistakably Douglas's sharp block letters. All pressure and control, he'd scrawled. Thought this might be more your speed. I stared at the page without blinking my fingers cold. No one noticed. Jenna was still talking about French doors and that cute reading nook. Margaret was already refilling her coffee. I let the paper fall back into the envelope, folded it twice, then slid it under my leg. Not to hide it, just to end it. The room was full of noise, but none of it reached me. All I could hear was the sound of that envelope scraping against itself, thin paper over thin paper, like something whispering that I would never belong here the way she did. They hadn't given me less because they forgot. They gave me less because they believed I needed less, because I'd always figured it out, paid my own rent, packed my own boxes, picked up the phone myself when the school nurse called. And I think that's what stung most. Not the insult, but the absolute confidence with which they delivered it. They weren't being cruel, they were being consistent. I hadn't planned on coming back. But guilt has a way of disguising itself as duty, especially when your mother calls twice in 1 week, using words like your father and hurt and can't lift boxes without help. It wasn't the request that got me. It was the tone. That syrupy kind of concern layered over unspoken accusation. As if refusing would mean I was cold or selfish. As if decades of quiet dismissal could be wiped clean by one favor on a Saturday. So I said yes. I drove the 4 hours home, parked in the same driveway Douglas still edged with a ruler and hedge clippers, and stepped into a house that smelled exactly like it always had. Lemon polish, overcooked roast, and the faint hint of something burning that no one acknowledged. Jenna wasn't there. "She's busy," Margaret said with a sigh that somehow made it sound like her absence was my fault. I smiled, nodded, said the right things. By Saturday evening, we'd completed the checklist, helped Douglas lift storage bins in the garage, listened to Margaret complain about Jenna's boyfriend, endured a dinner where every topic circled back to lake house renovations. By 10 p.m., I couldn't sleep. The guest room, the one I used to call mine, still had my old soccer trophies on the shelf, like proof I'd been there once. But the walls felt tighter now, like they remembered how many words I'd swallowed inside them. I wandered barefoot and quiet. The door to Douglas's office was slightly ajar. That alone was strange. He guarded the room like a church lights off blinds down locked drawers, passwords on everything. And yet, there it was open. The safe was tucked behind the file cabinet, small and gray, but unmistakably his. And for the first time in my life, the door hung loose. I should have closed it and walked away. I should have assumed it was a mistake. But something held me there, some small tug in my gut that said, "What do they keep locked from you that Jenna already knows?" I knelt, slowly, carefully. Inside were rows of manila folders, all perfectly labeled. Tax returns, property deeds, bank statements, some familiar, some new. I flipped through them in silence. Then I found it. A sealed envelope, plain white, on the front in Douglas's handwriting, to be opened upon death. My hands went still. Then I opened it. Inside a will. Not the one I remembered from years ago, the one they made a show of presenting at the dinner table when Jenna turned 21, where everything was split evenly. This one was different. My name came first. Next to it, a parcel number. A property I'd never heard them mention. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But then I saw the next page, a deed. Purchased under my name. Years ago. And below that, a signed authorization transferring funds using my name. The signature was mine. But the slant was wrong. The curl in the R didn't match. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had signed for me. And based on the bank activity attached, it hadn't just happened once. My name had been used. My identity moved around like furniture in a room I wasn't allowed to enter. I sat there under the soft buzz of the desk lamp, trying to piece it together. It wasn't just that they had kept something from me. It was that they had built a second narrative and written me into it without my consent. I didn't say anything that weekend. At breakfast the next morning, Margaret poured my coffee with her usual performative cheer, asked if I'd found a real job, yet then launched into a story about Jenna's new podcast idea, something about lifestyle branding and authentic influence. Douglas barely looked up from his toast. I smiled, nodded, played the role they'd written for me years ago. By noon, I was packed and back on the road, citing work obligations I didn't bother to fabricate. The moment I got home, I pulled my credit reports, every account under my name, every flag I had ignored. It didn't take long. The house, my house, the one they'd tucked under layers of silence, was real. Purchased 6 years ago, funded through a trust tied to my social security number. The address matched the parcel on the deed I'd found in the safe. But that was only the beginning. What followed was an increasingly tangled web of financial activity, quiet transfers between internal family accounts, reallocated funds, and at least one authorization bearing a signature that wasn't mine again. So I called someone I trusted, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in estate structures. I didn't give her the whole story, just the documents laid out in careful order, like I was trying to explain something I hadn't fully let myself feel yet. She called me back 2 days later. Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp. "Claire, if you wanted to pursue fraud, you'd have a case. But that's not what you want, is it?" She was right. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity and then control. So we started digging, quietly, carefully. What emerged over the next few weeks was almost absurd in its irony. On paper, I was wealthier than I'd ever imagined. Not extravagantly so, but meaningfully, the house, a small investment account I didn't know existed, and ties to a family holding company used to shelter assets during Jenna's business venture. The lake house was the most damning detail. That house, their pride, their retreat, their legacy had been mortgaged in secret 3 years prior to fund Jenna's failed skincare line. They'd tried to fix it quietly. Douglas likely believed he could repay it before the bank came knocking, but he couldn't. By the time I found the deed, the house was already flagged for auction. And that's where it got interesting. Because I bought it, not directly, not as Claire Hart. I set up a shell LLC, used my lawyer as a proxy, and submitted the purchase anonymously through a holding agent. It was legal, clean, undeniable. The paperwork took weeks. But when it was done, I sat there with a deed in my hands, and for the first time in my life, I owned something they wanted. It wasn't about the house. It was about history, about breaking the cycle, about making it clear that I had seen every inch of their neglect, and I'd chosen for once not to absorb it. They still didn't know. Margaret kept texting about Christmas, asking if I'd be home, if I could bring wine, if I'd heard about Jenna's new boyfriend. Douglas emailed me a job listing with the subject line, "Something with stability," and I said nothing, because silence when it's yours isn't weakness, it's power waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming. Christmas came again, as it always did. Same wreath on the front door, same chipped reindeer mugs in the kitchen, the same fireplace burning just hot enough to make the air feel dry but not warm. It was all so familiar, it felt fake. Jenna was already there, dressed in a new cashmere set, and hugging herself like the room owed her applause. Douglas stood by the mantel, with his usual mug of coffee eyes, scanning the room like he was doing inventory. Margaret floated in and out, humming carols off-key, and asking no one in particular if the cinnamon rolls were done enough. I placed my gift under the tree without a word. Plain white box. No ribbon, no glitter, no tag. Just wait. We went through the morning motions. Jenna opened a designer handbag and gasped on cue. Margaret cried. Douglas chuckled. There was a toast to new chapters and dream homes. I nodded, sipped coffee, waited, and then it was my turn. I handed the box to Douglas, gently, like it might break. He lifted it with both hands, surprised by how light it was. Smiled like he already knew it was nothing important. Jenna giggled. Probably socks, she said. Douglas opened it slowly, not because he was cautious, but because he was indifferent. He peeled back the lid, saw the envelope sealed in wax. For a moment he hesitated, then broke the seal and unfolded the papers inside. His face didn't change at first, just a tightening around the eyes. Then the color drained. He read the first page again, slower. The notarized deed. My name. The property. The lake house. Then the second page. The forged signature. The legal warning from my attorney. His hand trembled just slightly. Margaret leaned over his shoulder. She was still smiling when her eyes caught the bolded words near the top of the document. That smile faded like breath on glass. She turned to me. Claire, what is this? I met her eyes calm. It's exactly what it looks like. She blinked. Douglas didn't speak, not one word. Margaret looked back down at the paper, then at him. Her mouth closed, then opened again. You! You didn't tell me. It wasn't a question. Her voice cracked, not loudly, not theatrically. It broke the way bones do, clean, irreversible. Jenna clutched her purse tighter, as if it could shield her. She glanced around confused. No one explained. No one moved. The silence in the room thickened dense and slow, like syrup spilled across the carpet. Uncleanable. I stood up slowly, smoothing the hem of my sweater, and said it lightly, like I was thanking them for eggs and coffee. I won't be sharing the lake house. Not this time. There was no reply. Not even a nod. Just the sound of paper shifting in Douglas's hands as he tried and failed to make the words mean something else. Margaret took a step back from him, like space might soften the betrayal. Her gaze darted between the papers and his face. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just the truth I had delivered. It was the end of a performance they'd rehearsed for years. And the only person who hadn't missed their cue was me. No one spoke, not for a long time. Douglas sat perfectly still, holding the documents like they might disintegrate if he moved too fast. His fingers had stopped trembling. Now they were just locked in place, white-knuckled, unmoving. Margaret stood beside him, frozen mid-step, her face caught between disbelief and something worse, realization. She wasn't angry yet. Anger takes energy. What I saw in her was the quiet devastation that only comes when a story you've built your entire life around finally breaks in half and you're holding the pieces with no idea how to put them back. Jenna hadn't said a word. She was clutching her new handbag with both hands, like a child gripping a stuffed toy during a thunderstorm. She looked from face to face, blinking as though someone had started speaking in a language she didn't know. She had no frame of reference for what was happening. No script. That more than anything told me how deep the lie had gone. No one had ever told her the truth either. Or maybe no one thought she could handle it. I stood there a moment longer, letting the silence stretch. Letting it do the work I no longer needed to. They weren't going to apologize. They weren't going to explain. They weren't even going to ask how I'd found out. Because some truths don't need to be spoken to be understood. When I reached for my coat, Margaret flinched slightly, like I'd raised a hand to her. I hadn't moved quickly, just deliberately, like someone who'd finally decided the scene was over. At the door, I paused. Not for drama, not for effect. Just to look at them, really look. Douglas still staring at the paper's eyes, refusing to blink. Margaret crumbling by inches. Jenna silent for once. And me still standing. Just so we're clear, I said softly, I won't be giving it back. Not the house. Not my name. Not anymore. That was all. Then I opened the door and let the cold December air pour in behind me, like water after a dam breaks. It hit my face like truth. Sharp. Honest. Clean. By evening, the snow had started. Soft, steady flakes drifted down in the kind of silence only winter understands, where the air doesn't just fall quiet, it settles. Every sound dulled. Every edge softened. I sat in an old armchair near the window of the lake house. My lake house. A blanket around my shoulders. Coffee cooling slowly beside me. No music, no voices. Just the faint creak of the wood as the wind moved across the siding. The place wasn't glamorous. It needed new floors. The chimney smoked when it shouldn't. The thermostat clicked 3 times before doing anything useful. But it was mine. And no one had handed it to me. They never meant for me to have it. They'd tried to hide it, bury it in paperwork and assumptions in the comfort of thinking I wouldn't look too closely, that I wouldn't ask questions, that I'd keep playing my role, the quiet one, the capable one, the girl who always cleaned up but never asked why the mess existed in the first place. I didn't feel triumphant. No part of this felt like victory. It felt like release. Like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years without even realizing it. I thought for a moment about calling someone. A friend, a voice outside the family. Just to say it out loud what I'd done, what I'd uncovered, what I'd taken back. But I didn't. Some stories don't need witnesses. Some peace doesn't need applause. I didn't know if they'd reach out. If Margaret would call voice-heavy with half-truths and carefully timed regret. If Douglas would send one of his articles clipped from the local paper, pretending like nothing had happened. If Jenna would send a meme, like she always did, pretending we were still close. Maybe they would, maybe not. I no longer cared. I wasn't angry. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I'd drawn a line not in anger, but in survival. And this time, I wasn't stepping back over it. The snow kept falling slow and certain. I watched it coat the railings, then the trees, then the edges of the lake. Funny thing is, now that I finally own the one thing they cherished most, I don't even want it, but I needed them to know I could take it, just like they took pieces of me year by year wrapped in silence and called it love. If you've ever left a room and never looked back, just leave a single dot. I'll know you were here.